Let's go! The EM rifles have finally gotten nerfed. Their double damage has been reduced from 75% to 55%, reducing their overall damage by 13%. And their auto aim has been removed. Is this enough to make the railguns better? Watch to find out. And if you do enjoy the video, consider liking and subscribing. I'd appreciate it a ton. So the EM Rifle 16 is an average of 205,000 damage per shot, while the Railgun 16 is an average of 113,000 damage per shot. And the EM Rifle 12 does an average of 153,000 damage per shot, while the Railgun 12 does an average of 85,000 damage per shot. So the EM rifles definitely deal way more damage per shot than the railguns. But the EM rifles only have 1 shot in their magazine, while the railguns have 3 shots in their magazine. So the EM Rifle 16 is an average of 205,000 damage per mag, while the Railgun 16 is an average of 338,000 damage per mag. And the EM Rifle 12 does an average of 153,000 damage per mag, while the Railgun 12 does an average of 236,000 damage per mag. So the Railguns deal a lot more damage per mag than the EM rifles. They have the advantage that they can store up all their shots and then unload them all at once at the enemy. But although the Railguns can store up more shots than the EMs, they take longer to store up those shots. With their reload implants maxed, the EM rifles have a reload of 4.1 seconds per shot, while the Railguns have a reload of 7.6 seconds per shot. And this gets worse when reloading the whole mag. The EM rifles take 4.1 seconds to reload the whole mag, while the Railguns take 22.8 seconds to reload the whole mag. So the Railguns have a much worse reload than the EMs, and it's definitely a weakness for them. But the EM rifles have a worse max range than the Railguns. With both of their range implants, the EM rifles have a max range of 215 meters, while the Railguns have a max range of 234 meters. So if you want to snipe from long distances, use the Railgun range implant and snipe with the Railguns. Next is their implants. They both have a legendary weapon damage implant. The EM damage implant increases the damage by 30%, and the Railgun damage implant increases the damage by 30% as well. So their damage implants are equal, and the EMs have an epic reload implant, while the Railguns have a legendary reload implant. But weirdly enough, the EM rifle's reload implant reduces the reload more than the Railgun's reload implant. The EM rifle's reload implant reduces the reload by 23%, while the Railgun's reload implant reduces the reload by 22%. So the EM rifle's reload implant is better and cheaper to upgrade. They also both have a range implant. The EM rifles have a legendary range implant, while the Railguns have an epic range implant. The EM rifle's range implant increases the range by 30%, while the Railgun range implant increases the range by 42%. But the EM rifle range implant also does something else. It reduces the EM rifle's optimal range by 30%. So it makes their optimal range from 75 plus meters to 53.5 plus meters. This makes it so their damage fall off starts at 52.5 meters instead of 75 meters. This makes a huge difference, and this is a must-have implant for the EMs in my opinion. This makes the EM rifle range implant much more useful than the Railgun range implant. So here's how the damage fall off is. The Railgun 16s deal an average of 112.8 thousand damage regardless of how far you are from the enemy, and the EM rifle's damage falls off the closer you get. The EM rifles still deal way more damage per shot than the Railguns even when you get close with them. It's only at 12 meters and closer when the Railguns deal more damage. So if you want more damage, it's only worth it to use the Railguns if you're 12 meters or closer. And with the EM Rifle 12 and the Railgun 12, it's the same thing. The Railgun 12 deals an average of 84.6 thousand damage regardless of how far you are from the enemy, and the Railgun 12's damage only becomes more once you get 12 meters or closer to the enemy. So the EM rifles have much better damage per shot even with the damage fall off. And the EM rifles also have much better DPS than the Railguns. The EM Rifle 16 has an average DPS of 205,000 damage, while the Railgun 16 has an average DPS of 94,000 damage. And the EM Rifle 12 has an average DPS of 153,000 damage, while the Railgun 12 has an average DPS of 70,000 damage. So if damage is what you want, the EM rifles are definitely better. Next is their weaknesses. The EM rifles' weakness is that they have a small mag. This makes it so you're vulnerable after each shot, and they're worse at point blank range, so you can't really use them there. And they have a shot delay, so it makes it so that the enemy can react to the shots and hide from them. And they also need an extra implant slot since the EM rifle range implant is a must-have implant. And the Railgun's weakness is that they deal way less damage, they have a much slower reload, they fire slowly, there's a 1.2 second delay between each Railgun shot. And they also have a much worse double damage chance. They only have a 15% double damage chance, while the EMs have a 55% double damage chance. And they're also bad early and mid game. Since the railguns don't have an 8 or 10 energy variant, they're not very great early or mid game. So the railguns are really only good on a 32 energy mech when they're maxed. The EMs on the other hand are really good early game, mid game, and late game. Next, I'm going to be going over what weapon is better for each mech. For the 32 energy mechs, railguns are usually better. This is because most of the 32 energy mechs are slow, so they need the precision and the instant damage of the railguns to compensate for their speed. So Guardian Rails is definitely better than Guardian EMs. Onyx Rails is definitely better than Onyx EMs. Gatecrasher Rails is definitely better than Gatecrasher EMs. But Panther is the exception. Against bots, I think Panther EMs is definitely better. The better damage and reload of the EMs makes it a better bot killing build. But against players, I think Panther Rails is slightly better. You don't really need the extra damage of the EM Rifle 16 since most people use squishy mechs. They use mechs like Panther, Surge, and Redeemer who can get one-shot by the railguns, so you don't really need the EMs on Panther. But with 24 energy mechs, it's the opposite. They're usually better with EMs. This is because they're faster so they can use their speed to offset the delay of the EMs. Surge EMs is better than Surge Rails, but Surge Rails is still a really strong build. A lot of people have started using that build on Surge. And Killshot EMs are better than Killshot Rails. Redeemer EMs is also better than Redeemer Rails. Eclipse EMs is also better than Eclipse Rails. And Orion EMs is better than Orion Rails. With Orion Rails you can't one-shot Bastions, while with Orion EMs you can. The only exception is Bastion. Bastion Rails is better than Bastion EMs. This is because Bastion is slower, so he needs the precision and the instant damage of the railguns. So EMs are better on 24 energy mechs overall, but this changes in 2v2 and 1v1s. In 2v2s and 1v1s, I'd use railguns on all of these mechs. Although EMs are better in CPC and 5v5, railguns are definitely better in 2v2s and 1v1s. They completely dominate 2v2s and 1v1s. Some people even use 2 railgun mechs in their 2v2 or 1v1 hangars. But the EM nerf has actually made EMs better in 2v2s and 1v1s. Their auto aim was the thing holding back their precision, and now it's gone. Now you have much more precision with the EMs and you can hit enemies that are wall peeking now. So the EM nerf has made EM slightly more viable in 2v2s and 1v1s, and it's made railguns slightly more viable in CPC and 5v5. So which weapon is better, railguns or EMs? I think overall EMs are better than the railguns. EMs are still the most OP weapon in the game and definitely better than the disc launchers and railguns. They're slightly less OP now after the EM nerf, and they're closer to as strong as disc launchers and railguns now. But the meta has not changed much after the EM rifle nerf. In CPC and 5v5, the meta is still to use 3 EM rifle builds, but railguns are more viable now, and I'm seeing a lot of people switch from EM Surge to EM Rails. And in 2v2s and 1v1s, the railguns are still dominating. But CPC and 5v5 are definitely more important than 2v2 and 1v1s, so I think the EM rifles are still the better overall weapon. So which weapon should you invest in? The EM rifles or the railguns? I'd say if you're earlier mid-game, definitely invest in the EM rifles. They're much better than the railguns early and mid-game. And if you're late game, I'd still invest in the EM rifles. EM rifles are still much more useful overall. The only time I'd recommend investing in the railguns is if you only have the railguns and don't have the EMs, or if you're late game and like 1v1s and 2v2s, then it's not a bad idea to have 1 or 2 railgun builds. So to sum it up, railguns are better in 2v2s and 1v1s, while EMs are better in CPC and 5v5, and dual railgun 16s is usually better than dual EM rifle 16s, and dual EM rifle 12s are usually better than dual railgun 12s. Anyways, if you guys enjoyed the video, like and subscribe, and see ya guys!